On this episode, what really happened that fateful day at Mandalay Bay? The shooter, his name was Stephen Paddock. He was identified as the shooter.
The only official motive, right, that I have heard was that he was disgruntled with a hotel.
My theory has largely revolved around Paddock indeed being the shooter, but it being coordinated. I suspect there was somebody else in that room with Paddock.
Somebody who was the best source of information about what occurred in that hotel room on that night, and you let them leave the country. Not just eyewitness evidence, but we have video footage of helicopters being involved.
That, I think, does lend some credence to the helicopter theory. The helicopter theory, just to be very clear, is that somebody was shooting out of the helicopter downwards. Imagine a serene Las Vegas night, the bright lights glimmering like stars in the desert sky. But as the clock strikes midnight, a symphony of chaos erupts. In a matter of moments, the vibrant melodies of life are drowned out by the piercing sounds of gunfire. What really happened that fateful day at Mandalay Bay? Was it merely a lone gunman, or is there a darker narrative lurking beneath the surface? Join us as we peel back the layers of this tragedy, exploring the hidden truths and the unanswered questions that continue to haunt us. So pour yourself a drink, keep your mind open, and remember, when it comes to cocktails and conspiracies, nothing is ever as it seems. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, whether you're tuning in across the nation or around the world. My name is Shane Squarrick, here as always with my esteemed co-host, Mr. Phillips.
I like that esteemed word. It's a good word.
Phillips.
You know, anybody watching around the world who doesn't know you or I just thinks you're a complete moron, and I love it.
An absolute lunatic. That's a couple hat tips there for you guys. You know, there's a couple hat tips. There's a little bit of background for you here. The good morning, good evening, wherever you may be, is a nod to George Norrie. We've mentioned that before, which is also a nod to Art Bell, Coast to Coast Radio, kind of the inspiration for both of us. But the Mister, it's actually a nod to Mr. Kennedy, a former professional wrestler, and Mr. Phillips' name just sort of fit the mold pretty well.
See, look at this. You've been calling me that for 20 years. I never knew it.
Well, I figured as much. I just grabbed a wrestling catch line. It just, for whatever reason, we started calling you Mr. Phillips at one point, and that just it just blended. It just worked for me. So here we are, and that's
Works
now
for me.
your occasion. My voice isn't quite what it used to be, but you're going to get it every once in a while. I apologize for your rocks. Art, it's going to become your catchphrase there. Keep going with it. So tonight we're talking about the massacre at Mandalay Bay. The incident happened October 1st, 2017 at the Route 91 Harvest Festival. Most of you should probably remember it. If you're super young listening to this podcast, it might kind of be a figment of your memory, maybe kind of slipped in the back. But it was probably one of the most shocking events that had kind of plagued us, at least personally. Not so much the mass shooting. We've been in an era where, for better or for worse, you know, there's been a lot of them going on. This wasn't that.
This was a big one, though. This was a big one.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Right. There was 58 people that were killed, hundreds more injured. The scale of the massacre definitely shocked the nation. But the reason we're here tonight is because we got obsessed about this back in 2017 and the days following, because there was just so much mystery kind of shrouding the investigation and this guy, Stephen Paddock, and so forth. But before we dive into that, and there's a lot to dig into, we're going to do as much as we can tonight. I want to just kind of give you some background for those that don't know or just kind of don't remember. The shooter, his name was Stephen Paddock. He was identified as the shooter. He was a wealthy 64-year-old man with no prior criminal record, which obviously leads you to question what his motive would be and how he's allowed to kind of amass such a large cache of weapons. Not really in his personality. The weaponry. Stephen Paddock had over 23 firearms in his hotel room, including semi-automatic rifles equipped with bump stocks, which effectively allows you to rapid fire these weapons. It's not full automatic, but it allows you to really kind of pump out shots really quickly. Pretty close. There's also reports of explosives, and thousands of rounds of ammunition were found in his hotel room. Some anomalies in the investigation was that the investigation to the shooting faced multiple inconsistencies. The forensic evidence regarding the time of the shooting and the sequence of events has raised a lot of eyebrows, and we're going to discuss that quite a lot tonight, with some even claiming that there's multiple shooters involved. Eyewitnesses reported hearing gunfire from multiple different directions. Some even suggested that there were shots fired on the ground from the ground level, promoting some speculation about that coordinated attack. And then, of course, has become the trend in every single one of these we do, the media coverage. The portrayal of the incident has been heavily scrutinized because, of course, why wouldn't it be with the media? And some believe that key details were omitted or downplayed, suggesting a little bit of a cover-up of the true nature of the events, which Mr. Phillips parlays us right into the government's response. And the aftermath of the shooting, so a lot of legislations proposed regarding gun control. But as always, with all of these mass shootings, nothing ever materializes and it's dropped off immediately. That to you and I probably doesn't make much of a difference, but to a lot of people that are gun control advocates tend to question, why do they keep smothering this underneath? Is there something more powerful going on that are obstructing these reforms right here? And then tonight, we're also going to try to talk about some of the survivor stories and the Las Vegas security and how Paddock was really able to do this without anybody even batting an eyelash. So let's dive into it. The initial theory, Mr. Phillips, is the lone gunman theory. So the official narrative is Stephen Paddock acted alone, driven by personal demons and mental health issues. Always the popular one to come in there.
Yeah. Not to say that, look, I mean, to your point you mentioned earlier, right? There's been a lot of mass shootings around the country, you know, over the past 20 plus years. Mental health it's an issue in this country, right? Like, we certainly have a mental health problem, but that doesn't explain every single one of them.
Well, that's it. And that's become sort of the de facto excuse for everything in, well, this is 2017, but even in 2024, more so now, is anytime something happens, it's immediately pinned on mental health issues. And I'm not disagreeing that to do something like this, you have to be out of your fucking mind. But I don't think that is always the catalyst pushing forward. But I mean, you hear the excuse for everything. Oh, I suck at my job because of mental health issues, so I'm going to take vacation days where I'm going to take mental health days and sit on the beach, until I get canned from my job, or they have to send me a severance. I'm not talking about anybody specifically, of course, but it's become such an excuse that I almost have to laugh about it every time it comes up, which is sad because the people that do actually suffer from mental health issues kind of get dismissed on the side. But a lot of people take this explanation as sufficient, though, and don't think it requires much more speculation or investigation. So for me, one of the things that goes into this, and I've never had any sort of mental health issue, no real anxiety, nothing major at least, no real depression or anything. So I'm speaking from a level of ignorance here. You're 64 years old, extraordinarily wealthy. I mean, pretty much set for his life. To my knowledge, no kids, had a girlfriend, maybe a wife, whatever that arrangement was there, but seemed to live a pretty happy marriage, was not a big gun guy by all accounts for the people around him, and decides to load up thousands of rounds of ammunition, 23 different weapons, and march into a hotel room. Now, you and I have talked about ammunition. We are gun owners ourselves, and we've gone to the range multiple times. When you hear thousands of rounds in ammunition in the news, you're thinking this guy is sitting with just caches of bullets everywhere. He looks like Mad Frickin' Max. It's not really like that, though, is it?
No, not even close. I mean, and again, right, it depends on what caliber, round you're talking about. A 5.56 or a 2.23 round is going to be much larger than a 22. But to your point, I have literally buckets, right, of what they call golden bullets. It's just a brand. I forget who actually makes them. In any event, of 22. I mean, it's a bucket that's like this big, right? So, to your point, and even, okay, yeah, so I said 556, 223 is going to be larger. It's not going to take up half the hotel room.
Right. And that's it. And so when you're pushing these narrative of thousands of bullets, that bucket could fit, depending on the size of the ammo, anywhere from 1,000 to 4,000 rounds, depending on how small it is. So again, now he's probably, I think he was using, and we can dive into this more as we go through, he was using larger rounds of ammunition. So he probably did have a couple of buckets that he carted in there. Still suspicious to be carting this stuff in there, but you're carrying in a bucket. It honestly looks like an oversized ice cream bucket, or like, depending on what he's using, maybe a Home Depot bucket. Probably not that off-putting, strange, but probably not that out of the ordinary to see. What struck me, though, go ahead.
So just to add to that, right? So I did a little bit of research on Stephen Paddock, and I will, we have different theories, and we'll talk about them tonight on whether or not we think he actually did this. But in doing some preparation and research for tonight's show, I did research on Paddock, and what I found was he actually used, so he was very wealthy. He was an avid gambler, and he wasn't what you'd consider to be a whale, but he was a high roller. He was known by all of the Vegas, I almost said strip clubs, all of the Vegas casinos.
Probably those two.
I'm sure he was.
Probably those two, yeah.
Point being, so what he actually did was he used the service access elevator. And now normally, to your point, it would be a little odd to have a high roller or anybody bring their own luggage up. Usually you'd have some kind of a bellhop or a service person do that. I don't know if you still use the word bellhop. It's 2024. I don't think I've ever used that word.
Yeah, I think that's still a word.
For tonight, we're going to say bellhop. Normally you'd have a bellhop use it, but it's not uncommon for these high rollers to be a little bit more, I don't want to say secretive, maybe that's not the right word, but just a little bit more cautious and kind of want to bring their own luggage up. So he actually used this service elevator, apparently, to bring all of his ammunitions and, his weapons in duffel bags up to his room. That's what I got for you.
Do you think, though, that being a high roller and potentially knowing people in Vegas would give him that access, though? If he's there regularly, maybe he knows somebody in the staff, and he's like, yeah, I'm not going to deal going through the lobby. Does that seem out of character for you?
No, look, listen, money buys anything and everything, right? If you're spending enough money at that casino, they're going to let you do whatever the fuck you want to do. And if you don't want a bellhop touching your shit and you want to use the service elevator, they're going to go ahead, Mr. Paddock, right this way.
And it's also assuming the fact that he brought all of this stuff in one day. Right. So just because you have the key to the room now, you can enter and exit all you want. Exactly. Anybody that's been on vacation knows that you can cart shit in and out of your room all day. The bellhop's there to help you kind of unload your shit when you first get there. You can use them other times, but they largely kind of ignore you after that point, because once you're in, you get that first impression. Dude, you don't give a shit.
How many times, I know I have, before I was 21, right? We live in New Jersey, so we would go to Atlantic City all the time, and we're only about 45 minutes, maybe an hour max outside of AC, and we would throw drinks, we throw alcohol in our luggage, and then bring it up to the room, and nobody have any idea, right? So no, it's not uncommon to smuggle anything you want anywhere you want.
Right. And so if you think like a duffel bag loading the stuff in there, probably doesn't seem that unusual. Maybe nobody's looking. What struck me, though, as unusual is you're going through this plan, right? Because this obviously isn't something you just did off of a whim, in my opinion. Why do you need 23 guns? That's where it sounds excessive to me.
Yeah, oh yeah.
At the best case scenario, maybe 4, assuming that you're strapping 2 on your back and you got 2 holstered in your hands or whatnot. But other than that, that's what's weird to me. And that's where I started to think that like something doesn't feel right, because you're in a hotel room, and I realize that there's a lot of people down below and you've got all this ammo up there. That's fine too. But like, there's something called magazines. Like, you load the magazines and you can utilize as much of the ammo as you want. It's not like you have to change the gun every single time you want to use another one.
Now, you can have each gun hot and be ready to rock and roll and not have to worry about swapping out a mag.
Sure.
So
but then you're swapping the gun, though. You're putting it down and picking up another one.
Right. It's effectively the same amount of time.
And putting the same thing. Right. Like,
exactly.
And there's so much more of a risk to bring in multiple weapons than it is to just bring in one with the same amount of ammo, or 2 with varying ammo. So that, to me, is the first red flag. Is it seems excessive. Why? Why would it be that excessive? I don't think anybody that was planning stuff like this would plan to bring that amount of stuff with them, especially a person that's not known to be a shooter. He's not known to be a
Sure.
gun advocate. It's not really known. Maybe he did. It's Nevada. Gun laws are pretty loose over there, all things considered. Maybe he did. Maybe he was going to the range all the time. But to the best of my knowledge, according to what his brother was saying, he really wasn't in his personality to be doing that kind of stuff. But high roller, probably armed at some point, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
The mental health one we can look at a little bit. There was no mental health history.
None.
And so when that was cited as a reason for this happening, most people are saying it was a spontaneous act. And so that's, again, where the official narrative breaks for me, is because you can't have both, right? You can't say it was a mental health issue and then have it this coordinated. You also can't say it was spontaneous and it was this coordinated. It's not spontaneous to go out and get thousands of rounds of ammo as not necessarily an active gun collector and get 23 guns. Right. Mm-hmm. That's not spontaneous. That's planned. And to choose that night, to choose or to get a room where you've got access over, overlooking the concert, that's not spontaneous. That is orchestrated. And so that's why, when I look at that mental health argument saying that, oh yeah, he must have just been going crazy. Nah, it doesn't really make sense in that regards. It's coordinated, and somebody that's going to be unstable. Yes, they might be planning this, but I apologize for even suggesting this, but go look at a lot of the other active shooters that have went on. They kind of just go in there on a whim. I mean, they know they're going to do it, but they just get up that day. They go. They're very uncoordinated. They don't necessarily have a plan, and you can see that if you follow their tracks. They just sort of meander around and just try to do the most they can. That doesn't seem to be the case here, and so that, to me, is red flag number 2. All of the perpetuation, garbage, god awful. Get them out with all of that stuff with the media. Where do you feel
now,
so far?
So speaking on the media, right? So this was 7 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And some more things have come out over time about what his motive may have been. So, some more details about the planning specifically. And if you read the official narrative and if you followed it to this point, the legacy or corporate media, the captured media, whatever you want to call them, will tell you that, the FBI, actually, obviously seized all of his electronics, and they found that he was... he had actually also rented some other rooms by other festivals in other states, and so this wasn't as willy-nilly, if you will. Again, that's if you believe the corporate media. But what I love is, and I'm not sure if you have heard of this, right? But the only official motive, right, that I have heard was that he was disgruntled with a hotel. He was disgruntled with the Vegas casinos. Right. He was disgruntled that they weren't getting as many perks and free drinks and free trips and things that high rollers would typically get. He was a little pissed off that they, weren't being treated as they were in the past. And so the media tries to push that narrative down your throat that he was disgruntled with the hotel, disgruntled with the casinos. So logically, let's go armed to the gills and rent out a suite and kill 58 people. That makes a lot of sense, right?
At a country music festival and not at a hotel or casino staff, where you've already smuggled the weapons in the building. It would be much easier at that point to just march through, call for room service, and just start clipping people. I don't know, or walk down into a casino and just go nuts. Yeah, that's very odd. Where we're going to kind of split off here is our theories, because for me, my theory has largely revolved around Paddock indeed being the shooter, but it being coordinated. Yours is not. Yes. Yours seems to tie in other, I guess.
Mine is that Paddock is
people
the
at play. The pets. Okay,
so
I'm kind of aligned with that.
He's the fall guy for all of this. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple different prevailing theories right here, right? One of which is that Stephen Paddock obviously goes in there. He does this because he's a madman. He's pissed off, blah, blah, blah. The other one of which is that there was something else going on there. And so there is a Saudi guy. Do we know his name off the top of our head? Do you have that in front of you?
Oh, my God. So it's funny. I was sitting there trying to remember, and I was actually writing some of their names down today. And they all just sound so goddamn similar. I'm like, I'm never going to remember which Saudi guy this is and that is. There's a shit. I can tell you he was the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. No, I couldn't tell you his name off the top of my head, but I'm sure you'll look it up as we speak.
I got it. Yep. See, this is where it benefits having this great computer in front of us as you talk. Exactly. I can do it.
I know. It's beautiful.
So Salman Al Ansari, He was
Yes.
reportedly in Las Vegas at the time of the shooting. His profile as a Saudi national raised a lot of eyebrows, obviously, given the context of the shooting. So he was staying at the Mandalay Bay Resort and Casino where the shooting occurred. So this is where the narrative for me plays in. As this meeting, because this was completely ignored initially. And so there was supposed to be some sort of a deal, some sort of an arrangement going on. He's now here in the United States. You know how tensions can be sometimes. There's speculation that Paddock was there and the shooting down below was a distraction so they can go and shoot this guy and assassinate this particular crown prince. That's where I've sort of lived with this whole theory is Paddock was there. I do agree that he was a patsy. I do agree that the government was behind this. I don't know that I'll go full MK Ultra, but it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility for me. But I think that he was basically set up here. I don't even think he was the only person in the room, but I think he was left there and was just thrown away. He was traveling overseas quite a bit too, because his wife or girlfriend, whatever she was from either Singapore or the Philippines or something like that.
It was some Asian country.
Like an Asian country, yeah.
And so he had actually wired like 50 grand to her at some point.
Right. Well, exactly, because he probably knew he was getting involved with something. So his profile, being where he's located, it adds up that he could have been a government asset, and that would explain, potentially the ability to shoot. But again, like all the other nuance within the room just didn't really add up to me. Where does your theory deviate from that?
So it's actually very similarly aligned with yours. I subscribe to the Saudi Arabian involvement, but it goes a little bit deeper. In terms of the whole, I mean, I believe that it was on a much grander scale than somebody shooting out of a window. First and foremost, we have video footage, right? We have actual video footage from Saudi. I'm gonna mess the name up. I can't remember if it's Riley or Ryan Page. I don't recall. If anybody listens to this, sorry about that. Let us know the actual name. In any event, we have video footage of his hotel room at the time that the shooting is occurring, right? Like, we have perfect coverage of the Mandalay Bay and exactly where that room is. And guess what we don't see? We don't see any gunfire come from his room. Not a single round fired from that room. So that's number one. Number two, and I have to give credit to I Am John Cullen. If you want to check him out on X, also on YouTube. If you really, really want to, I'm talking about go balls to the wall and go full deep down the rabbit hole on this topic, he is the guy to follow. He has produced more evidence than any three-letter agency or any law enforcement agency in the country. We have tons of footage of not only no shots being fired, but we actually have not just eyewitness evidence, but we have video footage of helicopters being involved. Okay? And for the longest time, and I was not really familiar with John Cullen and the work that he was doing, and I happened to stumble across one of his videos, it was probably about a year ago, and I was like, oh my god, I kind of, I forgot about Mandalay Bay. This is incredibly interesting, and I really deep dove into it. But to kind of get back to where my theory goes, it goes a little bit earlier back, and you kind of have to understand, and I'm going to do my best to keep this as brief as possible, because you could really, it's a very, very long and intricate story. You could spend hours watching videos on this, but it really goes back to the 70s when the Saudi Arabian king was assassinated. And since that point in time, there's kind of been splintered factions within the House of Saud, which is the Saudi Arabian government. And there have been, literally dozens of assassinations and assassination attempts. And, who's supposed to be next in line for the throne, they get knocked off, and then this next person's supposed to be in line for the throne, they get knocked off, and so it's this never-ending chain of assassinations and assassination attempts. And you fast forward to 2010, and we make a deal with Saudi Arabia. It was worth somewhere upwards of 100 million. Actually, it might have been more. Can't remember if it was 100 million or 100 billion. I know that's a very big difference in numbers. It was a lot of friggin' money. But we make an arms deal with Saudi Arabia that we're going to produce attack helicopters for them. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, where are we going with this? We've got Saudi Arabia. We've got assassination attempts over there. That kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier. But where does this helicopter thing come into play? So in 2010, we make that deal with them. We start, Boeing, by the way, is the company to start producing these stealth attack helicopters for them. And you go, okay, well, how does Saudi Arabia, how does another country get attack helicopters into U.S. airspace? Well, we made them here, and they didn't have them yet. So in 2017, okay, not only just 2017, but October of 2017, we actually had folks from the Saudi Arabian military come over, and we were training them on how to use these attack helicopters. Now, these attack helicopters were very close by. They were in Mesa, Arizona, not far from Las Vegas. Okay, something that you could easily fly. Now, by the way, these are military aircraft. Okay, so there's no transponders to them. You're not going to find them in any kind of flight radar. So you could dismiss that theory right now. In terms of saying, because you're going to get those people, oh, well, why don't we see them on radar? Well, because they're military fucking attack helicopters. That's why you're not going to see them on radar, all right?
Right.
And so, coinciding with the assassination attempt on the gentleman you just spoke of, whose name I already forgot, I believe...
Come on, Tim.
Again,
Salman?
I believe.
Al-Ansari. Come on. Say it.
Salman Al-Ansari. Salman Al-Ansari. Such a wacky name. Sorry to anybody out there that's Saudi Arabian and listening to that, but it's a weird fucking name. Sorry, I wanted to tell you.
Yep.
To your point, it was an assassination attempt on him. The shooting for the festival was a cover-up or a distraction for the assassination, but it wasn't just that, right? If you take a look at Saudi Arabia, the country of Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of ties to Muslim extremist and jihadist activities and terrorism, okay, that have played throughout the world. Let's go back to 9/11, right? Now, granted, you'd kind of have to alter your views on 9/11 and forget about some of the things that we've talked about on this channel for a little bit, but I think it's some words up of like 15 of 19, I'm not getting the numbers correct, but an overwhelming majority of the hijackers, where are they from? Saudi Arabia. Okay.
Right.
There wound up actually.
But I don't know that you have to alter your views on what we've talked about on 9/11.
That's true. That's true.
Again, you're talking about the CIA and the U.S. military having relations with Saudi Arabia and providing all these attack helicopters and so forth. Well, guess what? That doesn't mean that they can't take over some of their extremists that they're training and then make those guys think that they're doing it, not to deviate
You're exactly
off.
right.
So I think you're still 100%. Making the right point.
Yep, you're right. So, point being, right, if you look at Saudi Arabia, they've been involved in many terrorist attacks throughout the world. In 2017, who was our president?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, who was our president in 2017?
Oh, I didn't know if that was like a rhetorical one or not. It's hard to tell sometimes. That's our big boy, Barack Obama.
No, it was not, you sick son of a bitch. It was Donald J. Trump.
No? Oh, that's right.
In 2017.
2017? Yes, you're right. He was elected 2016. Right. You're right. Oh,
Exactly.
wow, I got my timeline all off.
Yeah. You know who really didn't like Trump? The House of Saud. Really didn't like Trump. In fact, you can go back and you can find at that point it was Twitter. There were some exchanges between I couldn't tell you exactly who it was. I don't even know what position they held, but within the Saudi government, there were exchanges between him and Trump, out there on social media, on Twitter. And you could kind of read them as kind of like shots taken at one another, but they really did not like Trump. So not only, right, so now let's put the whole picture together, right? It's a perfect storm for Saudi Arabia. You have a faction of the government that wants to knock off this guy. They're going to utilize this mass shooting as a distraction, and it's also a fuck you to the U.S. and to President Trump.
Right.
And that is what I subscribe to.
I'll tell you, man, that was significantly more detailed than I was expecting it to be. I'm not going to lie.
I had a lot of time to read today.
I can tell.
Under the weather, did a lot of reading.
I've wrestled back and forth. I mean, the Saudi prince obviously makes a whole bunch of sense, right? But then my whole question comes down to, if you're going to assassinate somebody, isn't there an easier way to do it than to stage a mass shooting, which is one of the biggest on U.S. territories? And that's why I've always struggled to reconcile that right there.
Right. And that's where I got hung up as well. It didn't sit right with me. I'm like, okay, great. Right. I see that you wanted to assassinate this guy, but I mean, you could do that anywhere at any time. Why did you need
like there's other ways to do it without executing it and staging a mass shooting. And the guy doesn't die in a mass shooting either.
Exactly. But when you take a step back and you think about who could have potentially been responsible for that, and you look at their ideology, well, it makes perfect sense, right? You're killing two birds with one stone.
Right. I want to talk about Jesus Campos. He was the security guard that was in Mandalay Bay, and he kind of became the central figure in the entire narrative that built. The initial response was Jesus working as security guard at the casino. Here's the shooting. He's one of the first responders to the scene, and then reportedly encounters Stephen Paddock.
Yep.
The problem with that is he's shot in the leg by Paddock while investigating the sounds of the gunfire coming from the 32nd floor. But his injury and the timing of the encounter changed the timeline. They don't add up.
It alters
and so
everything.
He goes on to all of these media interviews and he's talking about it. And at first, nobody really picks up on the altered timeline because everyone's sort of putting everything together. The videos are coming to play. The shots are being put into play. It isn't until much later that this is addressed.
At that point, the body cam footage had not been released, and once you have the body cam footage is kind of the smoking gun, because once you have the timestamps on the body cam footage, then you can put everything together.
You can start to put everything together. Yep, absolutely. What struck me as interesting, though, is all of a sudden his testimony is getting wiped out. He's at the time he's going to talk shows. He's talking about his timeline, and as the timeline's getting expanded upon, his testimony is getting wiped out. The body cam footage released, and all of a sudden you don't hear from this guy ever again. Now, I don't know if he's alive or dead. He could be alive. He could be watching this right now. I hope he liked and subscribed to the channel if he is. That also for me was the third red flag, as something else was going on.
Not only that, we let him leave the country. We let him leave the country less than 2 weeks after. Yes, we let him leave the country. Is that right?
Okay, so I didn't even know if he was still alive.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So you're talking about probably at that point in time, somebody who was the best source of information about what occurred in that hotel room on that night, and you let them leave the country,
right,
within 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It just doesn't smell.
I didn't realize that. So that adds to my suspicion about that. It's like this guy knew something was up, and I feel like when he was shot in the leg, he might have saw Paddock there, but I suspect there was somebody else in that room with Paddock. I don't think it was just Stephen Paddock, because I also don't think it's likely that the guy would have shot himself. And I don't think that somebody just barged into the room and he just didn't put up a fight, you know? That's always made me scratch my head, that this guy Jesus might have known more, and they were worried that it was going to come back to him, or that when he started seeing pictures of Paddock, he was going to say, no, that's not the guy that came out of the room and shot him.
Exactly. I also find, I question whether or not he was actually shot, right? So let's think about the logistics of that for a second. Mm-hmm. So if you're shot through, he was shot through a door.
Jesus or Paddock?
Jesus.
Okay.
So Jesus was shot through a door, okay? Mm-hmm. And now granted, it would have to be, let's backtrack a little bit. Think about what size round you would need to penetrate a door and what kind of round it would have to be, okay? It's not going to be a hollow point, because a hollow point likely isn't. Listen, I'm sure there are going to be gun enthusiasts and experts. They're going to go, this guy's full of shit. He has no idea what he's talking about. But I'm a gun owner. I own hollow point bullets that are rubber tipped that specifically won't penetrate things like doors and walls, because I have a family.
Well, we're not even talking about residential doors too. Like that door behind you is hollow, and it's, you know, it's basically paper mache. You can kick your foot through it. One kick even probably. These are hotel doors. You're not kicking the door down. It's
a big sturdy door, right? So if you think about it, it has to be a good sized round, and it's got to be a full metal jacket. Okay, it's a hollow point is probably not going to penetrate the door. So if you're getting hit with a 223, 556, 308, a big solid full metal jacket in the leg, you're not getting up and walking and leaving the country and doing all these interviews right after that happens. I'm sorry, I don't care what anybody tells you, man. That's going to absolutely decimate your leg for some good time. I just find the timing of all of it to be very unique and off and very weird. So I question as to whether or not he was actually even shot.
So the rounds that were used were primarily 223, and they suggest he had about 1,000 rounds of 223, which, again, as we talked about before, is very easy to carry into a place. 1,000 rounds, it's really not much. I don't know. I don't know that
nothing.
I don't know that I think he was shot or wasn't shot. I don't think I would question that in so much. I'm more just curious as to, now that you brought up the country thing, I might have even known that in the back of my mind. I just completely forgot about it. But now that you bring that up, like the fact that this guy's gone, and to me, it was always just the testimony just gets wiped away. This guy's never heard from again. Like he just disappears off the face of the planet. That just doesn't add up. Like I feel like he might have seen something he wasn't supposed to see there.
Yeah.
There was something that I really wanted to bring up this entire show, and I couldn't because it would have added to it because, ironically enough, the site was down the entire time. But there is a
look at that.
website called vegasshootingmap.com.
Yeah.
And you've seen this if you've seen any Ian Carroll videos. He had posted about this. Apparently, he always says he's going to get banned. I think a lot of people, when they say these videos are going to get banned, sometimes they're actually telling the truth, as the site was just down for the last 45 minutes. But sometimes I think they're just fluffing a little bit to kind of make it seem like you need a sense of urgency here. But
Yeah, like view it now. It's like it's a sale.
yeah, view it now. View it now. The reason I want to bring this up is because somebody with probably a whole lot of time on their hands took a Google map, and what they did is they created location points for every single piece of footage, every phone call, every account, and where people were of the entire night. Now, this is obviously...
And also 911 calls, which is huge.
Right, phone calls and 911 calls. Yeah, I'm coupling those together. I mean, as I scroll out, you can see this all up and down Vegas, all outside of it, everything that's associated to this particular incident. So as I scroll back, and let me make sure I'm on Mandalay Bay. All right, so here is Mandalay Bay Casino Resort right here, okay? And here is where that festival is going on, as evidenced by a bunch of the bodies right now. What was interesting to me about this was that you can click on all these icons and you can hear or view some of the videos. So this particular one is interesting. Southwest corner of Mandalay Bay. There's one right here. Closest video of Paddock's room. So I'm going to pull this video up and we're going to watch this real quick. It's pretty fucking aggressive.
Was I supposed to get audio? Because I didn't hear shit.
Oh, you didn't get the audio on that? Oh, bummer.
No.
How come the audio never works for Tim? It was so nice and loud.
Well, what was it?
Yeah, tab audio. I don't know why I can never get the audio. To share audio, share a tab or screen instead. I'll share the tab.
I'm assuming what you're hearing is a lot of
Well,
gunfire.
we heard the shooting. Yeah, I'm going to play it again just so Tim can hear it, because we want him to be included in this insightful piece here. So what we're going to do again, sorry for everyone that's listening. I'm not editing this because I'm tired of editing things in this damn podcast. So this is the closest person to it. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to talk to the audience by myself. All right, let's see if you can get this one this time. I don't know that that's not an automatic weapon.
I 100% agree with you.
I don't know that. Okay, so
not only is that
a semi-automatic rifle,
it's also a large magazine.
It's a large magazine, right? And I think there was evidence that he had like 50-round rags, which is perfectly. Yeah. I'm not saying acceptable, but easy to get. They're not very hard to come across. Not in certain states for sure. What I would want to point out though is that like Paddock apparently has 223 rounds. So I think the sound of the round, again, I'm not a ballistics expert, but it probably sounds equivalent to that. But if you even play like PUBG or Call of Duty on your Xbox, you know how hard it is to flick your finger really quickly to shoot like a DMR or a sniper rifle really quickly, even if you have like a rapid fire controller. It's really difficult to do. And so when you have these bump stocks, you're not necessarily just holding the trigger and going. Like, that has to be automatic. There had to be an automatic conversion, because that is just too rapid fire that I think even the fastest Xbox player is not flicking their thumbs that quickly. It just sounded a little off to me.
Yeah. So to your point, listen, when you go to the range will tell you, especially if it's an indoor range, no rapid fire, right? Mm-hmm. Anybody who's gone to the range, you kind of do it every once in a while because you kind of want to know what it feels like, right?
Yep.
And again, it's not like I shoot all the time. I've never been in the military. I'm not an avid shooter, but I've shot enough to say that is almost impossible to pull a trigger that many times that quickly. Yeah. You got to be really fucking good if you're doing that. So you talked a little bit about helicopters before, and I wanted to make sure we brought up this video because I think it's important, and we're kind of backtracking a little bit here because again, this website wasn't working for a while. Do what we want.
That's it. But it'll give you guys some context here. So I'm going to play this. This is footage of a helicopter being in there. Now, before I play this, what's interesting to note, for those that are watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see, but those that are just listening, The helicopter looks like it's moving in the opposite direction that it was supposed to be reported. So we're going to see it here in the footage, and it doesn't look like it has audio right now, so that's good. Let's see if I can maybe speed up this video a little bit here. Okay, so this is the helicopter footage. Sorry, this is not of seeing the helicopter, and there's the room right there.
Yeah, so there were helicopters on site. After
there's another broken one right there. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
This is 30 minutes long, so I'm not going to show this entire footage here. Yeah, that was not the helicopter footage I thought it was going to be. There is footage of people seeing the actual helicopters themselves.
Yep.
I'm just going to play a couple other videos that were happening. Some of these videos are a little bit long here, but just to kind of give you guys some context on what actually happened, what people were seeing. Was there anything specific that you had wanted to point out?
Yeah, so if we can't pull it up, and for those who are interested, go check out, as I said before, John Cullen. I believe his page is called, his YouTube page is called John E. Hoover, at I Am John Cullen. And you can dive down that rabbit hole, and if you want to see helicopters, maybe you're going to see helicopters. And what's really, really interesting about that is, I mean, it's indisputable, in my opinion, video evidence of what is airspace, okay? There's no hotel where you're looking in the sky and you're hearing machine guns fire and you're seeing muzzle burst. I mean, it's to me, unless it's doctored, okay? Of course it could be. But if you take the video footage at face value, you can't tell me that weapons weren't fired from helicopters. We have video footage of it. And that also explains why you have so many 911 calls and reports of shooting at so many different hotels, right? It's not just at Mandalay Bay. It's at the Bellagio. It's at New York. It's at Paris. It's at many different casinos and hotels on the Vegas Strip, all kind of, close together. But reason being is it's not coming from just Mandalay Bay. It's coming from helicopters that are flying around. So yeah, maybe at one point it was over at Mandalay Bay, but 10 seconds later it's over by the Bellagio, right? And so that evidence really just ties in well with the fact that helicopters were used.
And there's a lot of commentary out there that there was no shooting from the hotel room at all, that you couldn't see the flashes and that it was coming from other areas. There's a lot of testimony that there's shooting on the ground. Those are things where I'm not totally convinced about that either. Like I still do. I mean, they broke the window, right? You aren't breaking a hotel window that easily. You're not just throwing a chair through it. It's not, especially in Vegas where people are suicidal way more than anywhere else. You're not just throwing a chair through it. I think that was shot out. And I do think somebody was 100%. Shooting a gun out from there. Were you spraying from that distance and hitting people? Most likely there was a lot of people there.
Yeah, absolutely.
That still, to me, obviously doesn't. I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. Where you can't say that there was a helicopter. And there obviously is footage of a helicopter doing that. I wish I could find there's multiple videos. Yeah.
I could probably pull them up. I don't think that we can show them from the source that I can get them from. I don't think that YouTube would allow it. I think we'd get flagged.
Right.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, I guess
we're not going to be able to show it here.
With that as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier. But there's
source goes right.
Yeah,
there's a ton of stuff out there. Check out VegasShootingMap.com. I'll probably pull a couple other videos up before we go, but check out that because there's so much interesting stuff that's on there, and you can really deep dive into this for hours. And that's part of the problem with this one too, is there's so much to look at. One of the interesting things that you had mentioned was there was calls outside of the Mandalay Bay area. And you can see that as we scan back out the map. And I'm going to share this one more time for you guys that are watching on YouTube or Spotify. We take Spotify looks too.
Not only were there calls outside of that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but not only were there calls outside of that, and it's similar to what we're talking about now, but there were also reports of machine gun fire after Paddock was already killed, right? We have video evidence
by the timeline,
body cam footage by the timeline of body cam footage of 9 different officers, where you can go and watch it right now, and you could hear automatic gunfire well after Stephen Paddock was supposedly already killed.
So on this map right here, again, we're looking at Mandalay Bay right here on the left. We're looking at the Harvest Festival up here in the upper right. Now I'm going to start to zoom out, and again, you can look at this yourselves. And again, look at how far I'm zooming out, right?
Yeah, I gotta kill the spider while you're doing that. Yeah.
Oh, you kill your spider. So if you look all the way to the top up here, you've got a phone call right here. Manager reports injured man in his parking lot all the way up here. Okay, this one sees man hiding in a parking structure, hiding in Walgreens. Now these could just be people running around. This is another 911 call right here, right? 911 call 484. Look at this and look at where the helicopters are. It's generally where it is, all the way up the wind. This is a call saying shots fired. Okay, all the way up here. Now, this isn't some East Bumblefuck town in the middle of Arkansas somewhere.
It's a major city. There's no tumbleweeds in here, baby.
Yeah,
actually, there might be tumbleweeds in Vegas. I don't know.
Well, probably more Nevada. But this is going to be one of the loudest cities on the face of the planet. To hear gunfire anywhere outside of this area, here's another one. And this is relatively close, all things considered, but it's across an interstate highway here. How are you hearing gunshots at a festival this far away? I sincerely doubt you even heard the music. So there must have been something else going on, or at least the height of it must have echoed through. And that I think does lend some credence to the helicopter theory. The helicopter theory, just to be very clear, is that somebody was shooting out of the helicopter downwards. Were they shooting at the casino? Were they shooting down at the ground? It still begs the question for me, though, and maybe you can answer this, maybe you can't. Why? Why shoot up the festival for anything, right? It just doesn't really add up that way. What was the narrative that you're trying to push?
I think the most likely scenario was that it was too good to be true for if you look at people that hate our way of life, and it was just too good to be true. Like, wow, not only can we knock off somebody that we want to knock off, but we could absolutely torment the Western ideology that we want to bring death to anyway. And
scare the shit out of them.
Exactly. And I think that, and so that got me thinking, because I did a lot of thinking today about this, and I said, man, well, if that did happen, why would our government want to cover that up, right? That doesn't make sense. Why would our government
that's always my question, is what involvement do we have in this that we're covering it up for? I could never wrap my head around a lot of that stuff.
The only thing that I could come to, right, and again, this is something that I thought about today. It's not something I've put a lot of thought into, right? But it was Trump's presidency. He was only a year into his presidency. Actually, it wouldn't even have been a full year at that point, right? We're talking about a few months into his presidency. And did his cabinet, did his administration not want to, did he not want to let everybody know, hey man, I kind of fucked up and I let this happen. We got attacked. Kind of a wild theory, I know. Again, it's not something I've really thought through, but it was the only thing that kind of came to my mind. It was like, why would our own government, if that did happen, why would they want to suppress that information? I don't know.
Knowing what you know now about Donald Trump, and the 2 assassination attempts that just took place on him, the coordinated strikes on the election, COVID-19, do you think that there's the potential that this could have been orchestrated to make him look bad?
Absolutely, yeah. Could it have been the deep state, some 3-letter agencies that we know do not like him, right? That are essentially his mortal enemy.
We saw all of the BLM riots that took place, right? And again, you can say what you want out there. You're full of shit if you thought you were marching for any sort of rights. You weren't, because the only people that were ever really out there were burning buildings to the ground and stealing. That's all. That's what it was for. Nobody was.
And we also saw. Right. We also saw countless elected officials on the blue side championing this.
Including Kamala Harris, who is running for president right now and saying that you should raise money to get these people out of jail, as they just burnt down the towns in Minnesota where her vice president is from. Not to digress, but we saw Seattle completely taken over. They were taken over by armed guards and people trying to pretend that it wasn't the case, even though there's tons of video footage on it. So I question, and again, this is really obscure, and I'm not stating this as fact, but could that have been a motive if you look like you're destabilizing the country by these? Because, that is another argument, is Trump is very pro Second Amendment. Obviously, if this happens, how do you respond to that? But I think it doesn't necessarily have to be mutually exclusive again, and I keep using that phrase, but it's so appropriate here tonight. It could have been ill relations with the Saudis because Trump's whole thing was that we're not going to depend on anybody else. We're going to shut everything down. We're going to tax the hell out of all of you other foreign countries, and we're going to start digging for our own oil too. We don't want to be involved with you. He doesn't want to be involved. He doesn't want to be tied to any of these oil countries, which Saudi Arabia, that is how they have their money, is from oil.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you tie in the Saudi aspect with the fact that, all right, well, we know from our discussions that, these three-letter agencies are not afraid to hire or to work with all these other foreign assets to execute, no pun intended, plans and objectives here in the United States to destabilize our own country, to impose new laws like the Patriot Act after 9/11. Could that potentially be a facet here? And then that ties in again to who Stephen Paddock was. To have somebody with such a low profile, gambling debts aside, I understand that. Typically when you see somebody that has that kind of money and it doesn't align to what his job was, there's something nefarious going on behind the scenes. And I'm just going to speculate here as well. If you were a person that's traveling the world and maybe doing nasty things, you're probably going to develop habits. You can't really be a drunk because they cut you off right away. Mm-hmm. So what's the next best thing? Gambling, right? If you don't have a lot of money and you're gambling, but you somehow have all of these assets, sure. How does that tie up? And that goes into, again, not to keep circling out into a different topic, but it's not, I was going to say Brandon Routh, but that's the guy that played Superman. Randy Routh, the guy that just attempted on Donald Trump again. Guy was broke, couldn't pay his child support, but's traveling around the world and staying in fancy resorts and championing all these causes with all this money that doesn't exist. Right. And so I look at Stephen Paddock in a very similar way, in that I feel like he was tied to these agencies. I'm not saying he was an agent, but he was an asset in some regard. Combining what you said about Jesus sort of just disappearing off the face of the planet leads me to believe, or at least conclude, that he saw something he shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. The helicopter piece, the reports on the ground. There's not one report of a second shooter on the ground. They're all over. And again, I think look at the map. A lot of them
go back and look at the map.
Yeah, I'll pull the map back up right here.
Yeah.
And they're not all going to point to you and say this is what that is, but I mean, I can click through a couple of them and y'all can see. The thing for me is, and I'm not going to say that that's fact either, right? You're running around crazy. This is still a music festival. So there's strobe lights going off. Maybe there was pyrotechnics going on, or they were shutting things down. Maybe shit was getting knocked over.
Right.
Thousands of people.
It's chaos. It is utter chaos.
It's complete chaos. So I think that there's people that are going to mishear something. Of course. They hear a shot and it's echoing and they think it's somewhere else. But I mean, these are just accounts all over the place. Here's the gunfire from the Luxor lot. We'll just watch this one real quick. Oh, age restricted on YouTube. Oh, there you go. I guess I'm not logged in on YouTube. I don't care about this man streaming here. But you can see it inside the venue, hiding in a vendor booth here. People talking about it, shooting inside a choir here. People took shelter inside a giant freezer here. So like you see people trampling things over, tackling things. I don't doubt that they misheard a lot of things.
Of course.
Right? And this footage looks like it's completely gone. But I also don't think that maybe somebody did. I don't know that there was somebody on the ground running around shooting. Maybe there was. Maybe somebody they were armed, or maybe it was a security guard or a cop that was down there. They thought they saw something, fired off a shot, or shot back. They just didn't record it. But the simple fact that it happened, and there's all these accounts, like you can't dismiss all of these people.
No,
right?
And to your point about the accounts, we have eyewitness testimony of people saying, "I saw helicopters." Right. I saw the muzzle flash. I heard the rounds. That's what was shooting at us, right? Why do we just not believe them? Why don't we just chalk it up and go, oh, no. It was Stephen Paddock. Yeah. He was on blah, blah, blah floor of the Mandalay Bay, and nope, that's the only place the shots were coming from, right? Like, why are we so dismissive with these people and just... It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, we have eyewitness testimony of people that were there at the festival saying, this is what I saw. Right. It just doesn't add up. Get fired up about this one.
I know. Well, you've been really fired up about this one for a really long time.
I've been excited for this one. So one of the things that I kind of want to circle back to real quick, one of the things I forgot to talk about. So I mentioned earlier that there were kind of splitting factions within the Saudi Arabian government. Now, there was, if you kind of think about Republican and Democrat for a second, right? Just kind of think about the two factions. One is, and I'm not saying there's Republicans and Democrats over in Saudi Arabia, but one faction is...
Yeah, right.
One faction is very old school Muslim extremist, right? That subscribe to, all of the, what I would consider to be awful shit ways of life, of women not being able to drive and vote and go to school and just, what you would think of. And then there's another faction, which is much more progressive. And so Trump was championing the faction that was much more progressive. And so if you take a look at who would have been responsible for, the people in Saudi Arabia who would have been responsible for doing this, they were on the extremist side. Okay, so you have disdain for Trump there. Now, who was in power at the time were the progressives in Saudi Arabia. 10 days after the shooting, what happens? They round up all of the crown princes, and they're not just contained to Saudi Arabia, right? I mean, these are some of the richest people that you can't begin to imagine how much money they have. They're all over Europe. What do? They round them all up, and it's called the Night of a Thousand Swords, and they arrest them all. Why? Why do they arrest them all? Well, I'll tell you why. Because they just conspired to assassinate the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. That's why. So the evidence there just lines up too perfectly for me when you look at all of it together.
Fact.
And then you look at what happened 10 days after the shooting in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
I'm sorry, but if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a fucking duck.
Well, not in 2024. It can identify as whatever it wants, Tim. That's an interesting piece there. And that's something, again, I had no idea about. I've never leaned into the Saudi stuff because I thought it was plausible, but, I don't want to say coincidence, but
I always found the
odd.
Saudi stuff odd. And it just, I didn't make sense to me. I'm like, I subscribe to the helicopter theory because I could see it with my eyes that makes sense to me.
Right.
But how did the Saudis come into play? And it wasn't until I did a real deep dive and it kind of connected all the dots. Again, got to shout out John Cullen. Really, guys, if you're interested in this, man, this is a precursor to what you're really going to learn if you want to, dive down that rabbit hole. And then it all makes sense.
Has this impacted you when you go away to big events, whether it's a Giants game or a concert? Does that ever sit in the back of your mind?
I actually, oddly enough, I kind of thought about it, and I don't know if it's necessarily Mandalay Bay specifically, and more so just the temperature of what's going on in the world today, but I was just at a New York Met game last week, and, I did have kind of, like, fleeting thoughts through my mind. I'm there with my son, and I'm like, oh, man, like, it's just, what the fuck could happen?
What would happen in that situation, yeah.
Exactly. So sometimes, what about you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, every time we sit at the Giants game, because we're Giant Stadium is right by Newark International Airport, and I guess really JFK too, and LaGuardia is not too far off.
We're right there.
And so you see planes coming, and they come low over there because if they're going to Newark, they're right over the stadium. And so it's always been in the back of my mind, not an active shooter necessarily, because you wouldn't be able to get an angle on when you're in there. But, some jerk off wants to take that right into the stadium, and we ain't got nowhere to go. I'm like, who am I trampling to get over here? What's my pathway to trample?
You can take a piss from Citi Field to LaGuardia. And when you're at a Met game, they are literally flying directly over Citi Field. And it's funny, I was there with my son and my brother, and my brother goes, "Could you imagine if one of those just fucking crashed right into the field right now?" I'd be like, I said to him, we'd be screwed. Like, you can't run. What are you gonna do? So
you got too many people. You're gonna get stampede. Somebody's gonna get crushed and killed. You have to almost go the opposite way, people.
Exactly.
But I mean, I guess that's the point at the end of the day, right? To instill fear, because there's plenty of people that won't go. I mean, even personally, like, I don't have to be in New York City. I don't really like New York City anymore. And when I'm asked to go there, I often think, like, all right, well, what's going on in the world right now? Yeah. Do I want to be going into New York City? I mean, the last time I was up there, it was when Trump was coming in for his first arraignment, and I had no idea. And I was downtown, like blocks away from the courthouse, and I was on my way out of there when they were coming in, and the woman I was picking some stuff up from my old office, she's like, "Oh God, I'm surprised you got in here so easily." I'm like, "Yeah, there's so much traffic there." She's like, "Oh, that's because they're shutting everything down because Trump's coming." I'm like, "Oh, I gotta get the fuck out of here!" Like, not even the traffic standpoint. I'm like, some like lunatic nutbag.
Right, exactly.
A couple years later, and look what happened. But yeah, I mean, and I guess again, that is, I guess, maybe the ultimate point is to instill enough fear into the Western world that our ideologies kind of get shaken. But I don't know that it's always just those overseas people. I'm sure it is to a degree.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, we've had plenty of domestic terrorists, right? I mean,
we've had plenty of domestic terrorists.
Right?
And honestly, it could just be a situation like, Paddock is a big gambler, and even if, let's say, he was a CIA asset, or even if not, and let's say he was gambling over in Saudi. I mean, they're very well known in Dubai to have massive casinos. Maybe not Saudi directly, but the Saudis are very well entrenched in Dubai. Maybe he went over there, got himself into deep debt, and they're like, well, guess what, pal? Like, you're now our plaything over here. He fucked up over there. Maybe he was caught spying over there, and then that's how he was used as a patsy as well. So
who knows?
Always interesting to me, man. It's just... It sounds like you got a really good handle on this a couple of years ago when this all kind of happened and we were ripping our heads around it. It was so crazy just because it stopped. And a friend of ours, so we're not going to mention his name as respect to him, was so obsessed with it too.
Yeah. It never really
wanted. No, it just nothing added up. And the way it stopped, every time you get one of these types of instances, there's always a lot more that comes of it, whether it's documentaries or more media coverage or everyone deep diving into the what ifs and the conspiracies. And then it was deaded. It was stopped. It went away. It was the fastest open shut close case there ever possibly been. But there was nothing that led to it. There was no mental health history. There was no history of violence. There was no history of being a gun guy. Like, there was nothing that added up.
Right. And there was not enough questions being asked by the legacy media at that time, right? Certainly Stephen Paddock is a part of the story. There's no denying that he was there that night. He was found dead in that hotel room with all those guns, with all that ammunition. He's a part of the story, but he's just part of the story. And there's so much evidence and inconsistencies and timelines and video footage and eyewitness testimony, and nobody's asking the questions, right? And when you have that insurmountable amount of evidence and nobody asks questions, that's a red flag.
That's a biggest red flag of all, especially when you're not allowed to ask questions, like our buddy Jesus gets dumped out of here. We'd love to hear what each of you think out there. Please leave your comments below, like and subscribe, follow us on Spotify. You can comment on there too. It's actually pretty cool. It's on there. VegasShootingMap.com. I promise you, we'll spend hours on there. To whoever the creator of this is, it's really freaking cool. I've spent a lot of time in there. I don't want to regurgitate it all on you. We can maybe make another video down the line of just videos like this, but we're conversation. That's what we like. And who was the guy you were talking about?
John Cullen. I am John Cullen. He's on X, and his YouTube page is John E. Hoover. Go check him out.
That's awesome.
Hope I did you some service, John. I know I didn't explain it nearly as well as you can, but thank you for inspiring me, if nothing else.
And we look forward to future episodes. We actually have direct contact with a survivor from there and potentially some more through that. So possibly in a future episode, if it's something you guys are interested, we're going to try to get maybe one of them on. If they feel comfortable. Obviously, it's a very traumatic experience, but somebody was there and get their experience from it too. Just in a soft conversation, I guess, right? Because you don't want to push them too much and ask them too much about conspiracy. But that's it for us, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, it's Cocktails and Conspiracies. So long, everybody.